The notification popped up at 3:17 a.m. while I was reaching for my water glass, the soft blue glow of my phone illuminating the darkness of our bedroom. And there it was. A shared photo album update showing my husband Michael standing in a hotel room I'd never seen, his arm wrapped around a woman whose face was partially cropped, but whose red dress told me everything I needed to know, making my hand freeze midair as my heart began hammering against my ribs, like it was trying to escape the truth my eyes were processing. I'm Sarah, 34 years old, a financial analyst who thought she had the perfect life with her husband of 12 years. But in that moment, staring at the timestamp that showed the photo was taken just 20 minutes ago, when he was supposedly at a business conference in Chicago, I felt my entire world tilt sideways as the automatic backup feature we'd set up years ago to share our memories became the very thing that exposed his lie. My fingers trembled as I clicked on the notification, opening our cloud storage to find not just one photo, but an entire series that must have been uploading while he was doing whatever he was doing in that hotel room, each image more damning than the last. Champagne glasses on the nightstand, his wedding ring conspicuously absent from his hand, her shoes kicked off by the bed, and him looking happier than I'd seen him in months. The irony wasn't lost on me that we'd activated this photo sharing feature during our honeymoon, promising to always share our adventures with each other, never imagining it would one day reveal adventures I was never meant to see. And as I sat there in our king-sized bed surrounded by the life we'd built together, I couldn't stop staring at the proof that it was all a carefully constructed lie. My mind raced back through the past few months, the late meetings that ran until midnight, the weekend conferences that suddenly became mandatory, the way he'd guard his phone like it contained state secrets, and how he'd recently suggested we needed space to grow individually, which I now understood meant space for him to grow into someone else's bed, while I stayed home believing in a marriage that existed only in my imagination. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere like breadcrumbs in a digital forest, but I'd been too trusting, too invested in our perfect life narrative to follow the trail. Starting with the way Michael suddenly became protective of his phone about 6 months ago, taking it to the bathroom, sleeping with it under his pillow and jumping whenever a notification chimed, claiming it was just work being demanding but never quite meeting my eyes when he said it. There was that Tuesday in January when I'd borrowed his laptop to print our tax documents and noticed the browsing history had been cleared completely, which struck me as odd since Michael wasn't tech-savvy enough to even know how to clear cookies. Yet here was this pristine browser history that screamed of secrets being hidden, and when I asked about it casually, he mumbled something about a system update that made no sense. The location-sharing incidents should have been my wake-up call, like when he said he was grabbing drinks with clients downtown, but his phone location showed him across town at a residential area, or when his gym sessions somehow happened at addresses that weren't any gym I could find on maps. But each time I noticed, I'd convince myself the GPS was glitchy, that technology wasn't perfect, that I was being paranoid for even checking. Then came the credit card alerts I'd accidentally seen on our shared tablet, charges at restaurants I'd never heard of during lunch hours when he claimed to be eating at his desk, flower delivery confirmations that never resulted in flowers at our house, and hotel bar tabs at the Marriott downtown when he was supposedly at office happy hours. Each charge small enough to not trigger questions, but frequent enough to form a pattern I was too blind to see. The messaging apps multiplied like rabbits on his phone. First, it was just regular texts, then an encrypted messaging app for international clients, then another secure platform for security reasons, then a third one because everyone at work uses it. And I watched him juggle between them with the dexterity of someone living multiple digital lives. But I trusted him because that's what wives do. We trust until the evidence becomes too overwhelming to ignore. His social media behavior shifted too. Suddenly his profiles became private. His relationship status disappeared, claiming it was unprofessional, and he stopped tagging me in anything, stopped posting our photos, stopped acknowledging our life together online as if he was slowly erasing me from his digital existence, preparing for a life where I didn't exist, or maybe creating space for someone who already did. The phantom vibrations were the worst. His phone would buzz with notifications he'd immediately silence, messages he'd read with a slight smile before flipping his screen down, late-night alerts he'd claim were work emergencies, but would answer with the kind of careful typing that suggested he was crafting something more intimate than quarterly reports. And I'd lie there pretending to sleep, pretending not to notice, pretending our marriage wasn't dissolving one secret message at a time. The next 20 minutes after seeing those photos became the longest of my life as I sat there in our bed, my thumb hovering over the screen while more notifications kept popping up. Photo after photo uploading automatically to our shared cloud storage, each one a dagger to my chest as I watched my husband's night unfold in real time, through the miracle of modern technology that he'd clearly forgotten about in his passion. I clicked through them with the fascination of watching a car crash, unable to look away even as each image shattered another piece of my heart. Michael popping champagne with her in the hotel room, the two of them toasting with glasses held high, her red dress sliding off one shoulder, his tie loosened and hanging like a flag of surrender to whatever this was. And then the photos became more intimate, more painful, forcing me to close the app before I saw something that would be burned into my brain forever. The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m. when I finally found the strength to call him, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hit his contact. And it rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail, but not before I heard the background noise. Music, laughter, and unmistakably a woman's voice saying, "Come back to bed," before he managed to decline the call, probably fumbling with his phone in panic as he realized who was calling. My phone lit up immediately with his text. "Hey babe, conference ran late, already in bed at the hotel, everything okay?" And I stared at those words, at the casual lie delivered so smoothly, marveling at how easily deception flowed from his fingertips while I sat here with photographic evidence of his betrayal, literally filling up our shared photo album, the notifications still pinging as more images uploaded. I called again, and this time he answered on the first ring with forced sleepiness in his voice. "Sarah? What's wrong? It's almost 4 a.m. And I could hear him moving, probably stepping away from whoever she was, trying to sound like he'd been awakened from deep sleep instead of caught in the middle of destroying our marriage. And I found my voice surprisingly steady as I said, "I can see the photos, Michael." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by his sharp intake of breath and what sounded like a door clicking shut. Then his voice came through strangled and desperate. "What photos? I don't... Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about." But we both knew the game was over, that technology had betrayed him in the most ironic way possible, through the very feature we'd set up to bring us closer together.
"The cloud backup, Michael. The automatic photo sync. I can see everything. The hotel room. The champagne. Her," I said, my voice eerily calm as I watched another batch of photos appear. These showing them in the hotel bar earlier, her hand on his thigh, him leaning in to whisper something that made her throw her head back laughing, time-stamped from hours earlier when he'd texted me about being stuck in a boring conference dinner.
That's when I knew with absolute clarity that this wasn't a momentary lapse, wasn't a drunken mistake, wasn't something we could therapy our way through. This was calculated deception. And as I sat there at 4 a.m., 12 years of marriage reduced to a notification on my phone, I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to pretend those photos didn't exist. Instead, I was going to use every piece of digital evidence to ensure he never forgot the night his own technology exposed him. I ended the call without another word, and spent the rest of that sleepless night transforming from betrayed wife into methodical investigator, starting with screenshots of every single photo that had uploaded to our cloud storage, making sure to capture the timestamps and metadata that proved when and where they were taken, creating a folder on my personal laptop titled Tax Documents 2024 that would become my digital vault of evidence. The next morning, Michael came home with flowers and rehearsed apologies, claiming it was a one-time mistake, that he'd been drinking, that she meant nothing. But I smiled and nodded while mentally cataloging every lie because I'd already decided that I wasn't going to react emotionally. I was going to be strategic, systematic, and thorough in discovering the full extent of his deception before making any moves. Over the following weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize, someone who smiled at her husband over breakfast while secretly documenting everything, who kissed him goodbye each morning, then immediately checked our phone records online, studying patterns of calls and messages to numbers I didn't recognize, cross-referencing them with the timestamps of his supposed meetings and late nights at the office. The credit card statements became my roadmap to his secret life, and I painstakingly went through months of transactions, finding charges I'd overlooked before, jewelry purchases that never resulted in gifts for me, restaurant bills for two during his solo business lunches, recurring charges to a premium dating app that he'd apparently been subscribed to for 8 months, and hotel bookings that preceded his overnight conferences by several hours. I discovered he'd been using his work laptop for personal activities, forgetting that our home Wi-Fi router kept logs of all connected devices and browsing history. And late at night while he slept, I'd access the router admin panel, documenting visits to apartment rental sites, dating platforms, and even searches for how to hide assets during divorce, which told me he'd been planning his exit strategy long before I caught him. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy, cooking dinner while rage simmered beneath my smile, listening to him talk about his day knowing he was omitting entire chapters, sharing our bed while feeling like I was lying next to a stranger. But I knew that emotional reactions would only alert him to my plans, so I became an actress worthy of an Oscar, playing the role of oblivious wife while building my case. My investigation expanded when I created a fake social media profile, a newly divorced woman named Jessica, who coincidentally shared interests with Michael's type, and within days of sending him a friend request, he was messaging Jessica with the same lines he'd probably used on others, proving that the hotel incident wasn't isolated, but part of a pattern of behavior that technology was making surprisingly easy to document. The digital breadcrumbs led me deeper than I'd expected. Secret email accounts I discovered through password reset notifications sent to our shared tablet, a hidden photo vault app on his phone that I found when he left it unlocked after a shower, even a fitness tracker that showed his heart rate spiking at locations that definitely weren't gyms. Each piece of evidence carefully cataloged, screenshotted, and backed up to multiple secure locations, because I was building more than a divorce case. I was building an irrefutable timeline of deception that would strip away any chance of him playing victim or gaslighting me into doubting what I knew to be true. By week 3 of my secret investigation, I'd quietly begun positioning pieces for what would become Michael's digital downfall, starting with a visit to a divorce attorney who specialized in high-tech infidelity cases, and she nearly whistled when I showed her my organized folders of evidence, commenting that in 20 years of practice, she'd rarely seen such comprehensive digital documentation, which gave me the confidence to proceed with phase 2 of my plan. I opened my own bank account at a different bank across town, slowly transferring small amounts that wouldn't trigger suspicion, while simultaneously documenting every shared asset we owned, every investment account, every penny he'd spent on his extramarital activities, creating a financial picture that would ensure I wasn't just emotionally prepared for separation, but financially protected as well. The alliance I hadn't expected came from his own sister Emma, who reached out after noticing his strange behavior at a family dinner. And when I carefully showed her just a fraction of what I'd discovered, she broke down crying, admitting she'd suspected something when she'd seen him at a restaurant with someone who wasn't me, but had convinced herself she was mistaken, and now she became my unexpected ally, keeping tabs on him during family gatherings and reporting back anything suspicious. There were close calls that made my heart race, like when Michael almost caught me screenshotting his location after he claimed to be at the gym, but was actually at an address I'd learned belonged to his latest interest, or when he came home unexpectedly during lunch while I was downloading our complete financial records, forcing me to quickly switch screens and pretend I was online shopping, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I learned to use his narcissism against him, praising his dedication to work whenever he had late meetings, expressing understanding about his need for space, even suggesting he should take that weekend golf trip with the guys, knowing full well through my tracking that these guys' trips were nothing of the sort, all while documenting every lie, every deception, every moment he chose betrayal over our marriage. The tension of living this double life was exhausting but necessary, and I found myself becoming hyper-aware of every digital trail I was creating, using private browsing for my research, temporary email addresses for communicating with my attorney, even buying a cheap prepaid phone for calls I didn't want on our shared phone bill, because I'd learned from Michael's mistakes that in our digital age, every action leaves a trace. As I prepared for the final confrontation, I made copies of everything. One set for my attorney, one for my safety deposit box, one uploaded to a secure cloud service he didn't know existed, and one on a USB drive I kept hidden at my office, because I knew that when the moment came to reveal what I knew, he might try to destroy evidence or claim I was fabricating everything. But I would be ready with backups of my backups, a digital fortress he couldn't penetrate or discredit.
The perfect moment came on a Thursday evening when Michael was hosting his monthly poker game with his colleagues. 8 men gathered around our dining room table, including his boss, Richard, and the senior partners from his firm. Their laughter filling our house as I played the perfect hostess, serving drinks and snacks while my phone counted down to the digital explosion I'd orchestrated. At exactly 9:15 p.m., I clinked a spoon against my wine glass, getting everyone's attention with a sweet smile, and announced I had a special presentation about Michael that I wanted to share with his closest colleagues. Watching his face shift from confusion to amusement as I connected my laptop to our 65-inch TV, probably thinking I was about to embarrass him with old college photos or something equally harmless. "Gentlemen, I thought you should know what kind of man you're working with," I began, clicking to the first slide that showed a timeline titled Michael's Time Management Skills, and the room fell silent as they saw a split screen. On one side, his official calendar showing client meetings and late work nights. On the other, GPS data and time-stamped photos showing where he actually was. And I heard Richard's sharp intake of breath as he recognized several client dinners were actually romantic encounters. Michael jumped up, his face draining of color as he stammered, "Sarah, what are you doing? This isn't funny." But I continued clicking through slides showing credit card charges to dating apps during work hours, hotel receipts charged to his company card for personal encounters, and the pièce de résistance, screenshots of him messaging multiple women from his work laptop during what were supposed to be important presentations, complete with timestamps that his colleagues would definitely recognize. "Turn it off now," he roared, lunging for my laptop. But I'd anticipated this and switched to screen mirroring from my phone, continuing the presentation as his colleagues sat frozen, watching months of deception unfold in high definition, including messages where he'd bragged about fooling the old ball and chain and detailed descriptions of using fake client meetings to cover his activities, each revelation making his professional facade crumble further. The room erupted when I reached the slide showing he'd been having an affair with Jennifer from accounting, Richard's daughter, complete with their message exchanges, planning to meet at the conference where I'd first caught him. And Richard's face went from shocked to murderous as he processed that his protégé had been having an affair with Jennifer from accounting, Richard's daughter, using business trips he'd approved as cover for their rendezvous. "The best part," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos erupting around me, "is that everything you've seen tonight has already been forwarded to HR, the senior partners, and yes, Richard, to your wife as well, because she deserves to know why her daughter has been acting strange lately," watching as phones around the table began buzzing with notifications. The digital storm I'd unleashed reaching beyond our dining room to destroy his carefully constructed professional image. Michael's phone exploded with calls and messages as the presentation continued on loop, his mother calling after receiving the email package I'd scheduled, his sister Emma texting frantically, colleagues from the office who were watching the same presentation I'd shared to the company's cloud drive. And in the middle of it all, a notification popped up on his screen from his latest conquest, wondering why he wasn't responding. The same woman from the hotel photos, still unaware that their secret was now anything but. As his colleagues filed out, Richard pausing to look at Michael with disgust before saying, "Clear out your office. Security will escort you tomorrow." I felt no satisfaction, only relief that the exhausting charade was over, that I'd used the same technology he'd leveraged for deception to ensure everyone saw exactly who he was. And as I watched him sink into a chair, his phone still pinging with the consequences of his choices, I knew the digital age that had enabled his betrayal had also guaranteed his complete and utter exposure. 6 months after that explosive poker night, I found myself in a coffee shop downtown, genuinely laughing for the first time in years, as David told another terrible dad joke, his eyes crinkling with warmth that I'd forgotten existed in the world, and I marveled at how different this felt from the anxiety-riddled relationship I'd escaped, where every notification made my heart race for all the wrong reasons.
I'd met David through a professional networking app of all places, connecting over a shared article about digital privacy, the irony not lost on either of us when I later told him my story. And our first conversation lasted 4 hours, flowing naturally from cybersecurity to life philosophies, with him never once checking his phone, his attention fully present in a way Michael's never was. "You know what I love most about us?" David said one evening as we cooked dinner together in my new apartment. "We both have our phones face up on the counter, notifications on, nothing to hide." And he was right. After living in digital darkness for so long, the transparency felt revolutionary. The simple act of existing without secrets more intimate than any grand gesture. Our relationship grew slowly, built on Sunday farmers market trips where we'd leave our phones in the car, evening walks where we talked instead of scrolled, and the radical honesty that comes from two people who've learned that digital deception destroys everything. And when he finally said, "I love you," 3 months in, it wasn't through a text but whispered against my forehead as we watched the sunset. The difference was stark. Where Michael had used technology to deceive, David used it to connect, sharing his location not because I asked but because he wanted me to feel secure, even showing me his phone's photos without hesitation, filled with pictures of his hiking trips, and increasingly, candid shots of me laughing, existing, healing. Looking back at the woman who discovered her life crumbling through a 3 a.m. notification, I felt gratitude for the journey that led me here, to this small kitchen where love meant choosing each other daily, where technology served our connection rather than severing it. And as David pulled me close, I realized the greatest revenge wasn't the destruction I'd orchestrated, but the authentic happiness I'd found on the other side of betrayal.